Good morning all. This is the second part of the solution of Bihar Assistant Professor Civil Engineering question paper. So from question number 51 to question number 80 we will be covering in this section. So moving ahead, question number 51. Young's modulus of elasticity E, shear modulus at Poisson's ratio relation we have to derive. So we know E is equal to 2Z 1 plus mu, E is equal to 3K 1 minus 2 mu. So you can find easily the relation that satisfies is the option D. So whenever you are asked to relation of E with respect to the bulk modulus, then you have to use this relation. If you are asked to find the relation of modulus of elasticity with respect to shear modulus, then you have to use this relation. A bar is held between two rigid supports will be subjected to tensile stress if it is. So it is given that the bar is restrained between the supports. So what will happen if I will increase the temperature, this bar will try to expand, but due to this restriction this bar will not able to expand, so the compressive stress will be generated. So it has been asked to tensile stress, so temperature will be reduced. So when we will reduce the temperature, this bar will try to contract, but due to these restrictions or the end restraint, this bar will not able to contract, so tensile stress will be generated. So cooled will be the answer. Sometimes it has been also asked that whenever bar is not restrained, suppose this is the bar which is not restrained at the end, now temperature is increased and temperature is decreased, anything can happen. So what will be the type of stress that can be generated within the material or the bar? So in this case, if bar is not restrained at both of the ends, then no stress will be generated, since it is allowed to vary its dimension because there is no restraint. So in that case, no stress would be developed, right? So this thing you have to keep in mind. First of all, you have to see the restriction given. So if it is two rigid support, if it is between two rigid support, then the stress would be developed and strain would not develop. Remember, in this case, if it is restrained, stress will only be developed, strain would not be there. But if it is not restrained, then stress will not be there, only strain will be there. So delta L can be found out in case where it is given that there is no restriction at a end. So in this case, cooling will be the answer. For a body in a plane stress, the principal plane and the plane of maximum shear stress. We know maximum principal stress at on the principal planes, either at major principal plane or minor principal plane, shear stress is 0. Now it has been asked the maximum shear stress and plane of maximum principal stress plane or minor principal plane, what would be the angle? This angle is 45 degree and 135 degree. So we know the Morse diagram which tells the relation between the normal stress and shear stress. This is the sigma 1, this is sigma 1 major principal stress, this is sigma 2, and this is the tau max. So this tau max can be at two locations, theta is equal to 45 degree and at theta is equal to 135 degree. So 45 degree would be the answer. In one of the case, it would, just like in case of concrete, diagonal compression and diagonal tension. So diagonal tension is at 45 degree, diagonal compression is at 145 degree. In the next question, a hot rolled mild steel having yield stress is given. That means it is Fe 250, subjected to hydrostatic state of stress with a pressure of 300 megapascal. The stress situation suggests that. This is a little bit typical question from the failure theory. Now we have many theories to relate the situation of failure. So in this case, hydrostatic pressure is applied on a mild steel, which is a ductile material. So first of all, we have to distinguish between which type of material we are dealing with. So we are dealing with currently a ductile material, and hydrostatic stress is 300 megapascal. Okay, so using the equation maximum strain energy theory, we know the relation sigma square minus 3 minus 2 mu is equal to sigma y square. Whenever we will put sigma y as 250, sigma as 300, mu for the mild steel is 0.3. So you will find if I will not insert this sigma, then you will get the sigma as 161. That means at the hydrostatic force of 161, so you will find at sigma is equal to 161 megapascal, this mild steel will start yielding. Yielding means excessive deflection. A material can be failed by two methods. First one is yielding and second one is fracture. So in ductile material, yielding has occurred because of the excessive deflection or excessive elongation in the dimension. Whereas for a brittle material, the failure happens due to the fracture of the material. So since hot rolled mild steel is a ductile material, so yielding would occur at even very less force with respect to the yield strength. So at 300 megapascal, it will obviously be yielding. So yielding is occurred. Next is the concept of continuum in the fluid flow assumes that the characteristic length of the flow is. So in the continuum theorem, the fluid is assumed to be filled with the discrete particles where there is no vacant space in between, and which gives you the concept of density, the number of particles packed between a given volume. So this is the continuum theorem. Now it has been asked the characteristic length of the flow is. So in this case, characteristic length for a gas is defined little bit differ as compared to for a liquid. So for a liquid, it is the average distance between the intermolecular spacing. It is the average distance between the molecules that is there. And whereas in gas, characteristic length is generally defined by the mean free path. So whatever is the mean free path there is defined for a gas. Since gas is a very spread, gas remains in a very spread format, so the gas is generally defined by a large volume, whereas fluid has no vacant space in between the particles. So there is two theorems for defining the continuum theorem, but in all the cases the ultimate conclusion is characteristic length will always be much greater than the mean free path of the molecules. So this is the final result of the continuum theorem. So option B would be the correct answer. Next is 56. In a fluid flow, point A. So just read this question very carefully. You will easily able to reach to the answer. What is given? Point A is at higher elevation. So suppose this is point A, this is point B, and here is a head. Whatever head is there, HA is the head at A, whereas HB is the head at B, and the head loss that is happening between the point A and B is HL. Now read out the options. From A to B, the flow will happen from A to B if HA plus HL is equal to HB. Now what will happen? For flow to happen from point A to point B, what should be? HA should be higher than HB by HL amount. That means HA should be equal to HB plus head loss. In this case, what will happen? If I will take this HL, this side HB minus L would happen. So in this case, just remember, for flow to happen from point A to point B, so HA would be equal to HB minus HL, right? For from B to A, if the flow to happen from B to A, what would be the option? HA minus HL. That means whatever the head at HL, HA minus HL. Suppose we will just assume a head. Suppose HA is 100 and HB is 200, for example, in this case, for option B. So what will happen if HA plus head loss? So whatever the head of at HA plus, if you will add the head loss, it would equal to HB. That means head at B is higher than the head at A plus head A. Then obviously the flow will be from B to A. Always from A to B? No. It depends upon the head at A and B. From B to A, if HB plus L. So HB plus L is equal to HA. No. If this condition happen, then flow will be from A to B, not from B to A. So option B would be the correct answer. Next, question number 57. A laminar boundary layer velocity distribution is given to us and displacement thickness has been asked. So this type of question has been asked many times in many examination. And I will explain you all the displacement thickness with formula. So first of all, displacement thickness. So boundary layer thickness is nothing but whenever any boundary layer encountered in a fluid flow, the fluid starts to develop a boundary layer due to the restricted or due to the restraint provided by the boundary layer. So this is called boundary thickness. So now there are three types of boundary thickness: energy thickness, displacement thickness, and third is momentum thickness. So for displacement thickness, formula is del star is equal to integration of 0 to del. Del is the nothing but del is the thickness of the boundary layer, total thickness of the boundary layer, 1 minus u by u with respect to dy. Dy is y is the depth of the flow. So this is the displacement thickness equation. So in this case, u upon u is given as y upon del. So just insert it here, y upon del, and integrate it, and then apply the limit 0 to del. So what will happen once I will integrate it? Y minus y square by 2 del, limit would be 0 to del, and after inserting the del at place of y, I will get to the answer of del by 2. So del by 2 will be the displacement thickness. For finding the other thickness, that means momentum thickness is denoted by theta, and it is equal to integration of 0 to del u by u 1 minus u is the point velocity, small u, capital U is the stream velocity, upon dy. So what would happen in this case? If I insert all this value, the answer would be del by 6. Similarly, for energy thickness, del double star. For energy thickness, the equation is 0 to del, integration of 0 to del u upon u 1 minus u square upon u square dy. So this is the equation. You can also find similar result using this equation. For whatever energy thickness has been asked, you can use these formula to find out. Concept is remain same. Now two more questions that has been asked in the examination that I will discuss related to this laminar boundary layer. The first one is shape factor. Shape factor is nothing but it is the ratio of displacement thickness del star divided by the momentum thickness. This is called the shape factor. Suppose in this case we will find the shape factor, then it would be equal to del by 2 divided by del by 6, which will be equal to 3. So safe factor has been asked. Safe factor is the ratio of displacement thickness divided by the momentum thickness. Second thing that has been asked, out of all the three thickness of the boundary layer, which thickness is higher? So for this you have to remember, out of all the three thickness, displacement thickness would be the greatest one. That means del star would always be greater. Second is energy thickness, del double star, and third is momentum thickness. So this is the also important point to remember. So these two things can be additionally asked in the examination. So which thickness is the largest one and which thickness is the smallest one? So largest thickness is displacement thickness and the smallest thickness is the momentum thickness. Okay, so moving ahead, in this question option B is the answer, del by 2. Now mean drag coefficient is given for a laminar boundary layer as 0.015. For all the factors remain same if the length of the plate is decreased to 1 by 4th. Now decreased to 1 by 4th. Now the length has become 0.25 times of L. Now the length is 2.25 times of the original length. So what would be the effect of this decreased length on the drag coefficient CDF? So first of all we will see the drag coefficient formula and then we can easily come to the conclusion. So drag coefficient formula CDF is equal to tau naught divided by rho v square divided by 2, and it is after inserting all the values it would equal to 1.328 divided by under root Reynolds number, and Reynolds number is defined as V naught L upon nu, kinematic viscosity. So now you can see that this Reynolds number is directly proportional to the length, and this coefficient of drag, average coefficient of drag is, so this Reynolds number is directly proportional to the length of the pipe, and this coefficient of drag is that inversely proportional to the under root of Reynolds number. So this CDF now would be inversely proportional to the one of the under root of L. So now we can insert the value of L, 0.25 L here. So now the CDF will be modified by 0.5 times of the CDF 0, earlier CDF. So 0.5 times of the 0.015 would give you the value of 0.0075. Next question is high CO2 to BOD ratio of an organic pollutant represent. We know COD is the chemical oxygen demand, is used to represent the inorganic pollutants present within the sewage, and BOD is the biochemical oxygen demand. It is used to represent the organic matter or organic pollutant present within the sewage or the sample. Now to represent the ratio, high COD by BOD ratio means the COD requirement is high as compared to BOD. That means inorganic substance is on higher side as compared to the organic side. So the option would be low biodegradability of the pollutant. If it is the ratio of BOD by COD, if it is given that high BOD COD ratio means BOD is higher, that means organic pollutants are dominating as compared to COD, inorganic pollutant. So you can easily derive the correlation between these two. During temperature inversion in the atmosphere, air pollutants tends to. Now temperature inversion is the case when temperature of the atmosphere increases as we move upward. So what will happen in case of inversion? Naturally what happens as we move upward, temperature falls, ambient temperature falls. But the inversion condition happens when the temperature increases, when the ALR, adiabatic lapse rate, increases as we move upward. So in this case inversion occurs. What happens in this? That means a warm air is above the colder air. That means near the earth's surface this is the colder air, and above it it is a warm air. So in this case inversion occurs. So what happens in this case? Our pollutants or our smoke will not able to lift up. So what happens in this case? Pollutants or the smoke or the fog forms and it remains in the position where it is formed already. So this is the inversion case. Now in inversion case, the common example is fog in the winter season. In the morning we see, in the night fog forms due to this inversion condition. Since the nights are very large in the winters, so what happens? The earth cool downs much rapid as compared to the air. So what happens? The air temperature is remain higher as compared to the earth. So what happens? Inversion occurs and ultimately fog forms, and which remains in its position until the sun rays breaks it up. So as in winter season, as sun rays breaks this temperature difference, then inversion goes out. So this is the accumulate above inversion layer? No. It accumulate below the inversion layer? Yes. It accumulates whatever the inversion layer, that means warm air and the cold air is there, it occurs below the inversion layer. So this is called the layer. So it occurs always below the inversion layer. Disperse laterally? No. Actually this is also the condition of inversion, but it do not happen during temperature inversion. So disperse laterally, when disperse laterally, whenever high temperature inversion happens and from our chimney or stack some fumes moves upward, it will not able to move like this, it will move like this. This condition is called fanning condition. So in this condition what will happen? Our smoke will not able to move up, it will disperse laterally. So this is also inversion condition whenever very high inversion condition happens. So the question is, so during temperature inversion in atmosphere, air pollutant tends to accumulate below the inversion line. In this case there is no movement, there will be no movement. In disperse laterally movement will happen, but the movement will happen laterally, it will not either upward or downward. Next question is on the right angled road intersection with two lanes, two-way traffic. The conflict point is also very common question from the highway. So conflict point, you can remember it or you can find it also. Conflict point is nothing but whenever a traffic intersection happens, suppose this is a two-way traffic, this is going side, this is incoming side. So whenever traffic merges from one to another, there is conflict point. Whenever it intersect to one another, this is called conflict point. So this conflict point depends upon the number of lanes and number of traffics. So I will explain you for the common one. You can also calculate it, but this may take some time, but the easiest way to remember it. So for two-lane, two-way traffic, if the both sides are two-way, if the lanes are two-lane, both of the roads are having two lanes and roads are two-way, then the conflict point would be 24. If one of the road is one way and one of the road is two way, then one way plus two way, one of the road is one way and one of the road is two way, then it would be 11 conflict point. If both of the road is one way, then there will be the 6 conflict point. So this is the common relation that has been asked. So for 2 by 2 lanes in both of the road, if both of the road is two way also, then 24 conflict point will be there. If one of the road is one way and another road is two way, then the conflict point will be 11. And if both of the road is having 2 lanes but only one way, then the conflict point would be 6. Next is, so answer would be B option 24. Next question is, the radius of the horizontal curve is 100 meter, radius is given, design speed is given, coefficient of lateral friction is given. What would be the rate of super elevation? So we know the relation, E plus F is equal to V square by 127 R. This V is in kmph, R is in meter, E is the super elevation, F is the frictional coefficient, lateral coefficient. So it would always be equal to maximum value, that is 0.15. So maximum lateral friction in dry condition can be this much. In wet condition, it can be even be equal to 0. But the maximum value of this coefficient of lateral friction can be 0.15. So now we have to find the rate of super elevations, E. So just insert the value of F as 1.5, V is 50 kmph, R as 100. So you will get the E value as 0.046%. So when you will convert it in grade, it would be definitely equal to 21.1 in 21.3. So the nearest answer is 1.21.2. So this will be the answer. As per IRC, minimum length of transition curve for mountain region, rate of curvature is given, design speed is given. So to design the transition curve, there are 3 factors considered. The first is rate of change of super elevation. Yes, the very first criteria is rate of change of centrifugal acceleration. By this, LS is defined as V square upon C times R, where C is equal to 80 upon 75 plus R. So this is the formula based on the rate of change of centrifugal acceleration. Second criteria is introduction of E, that means super elevation. What is the rate of introduction of super elevation? And third is due by IRC to provide the minimum length of the transition curve, which is asked in this question. So IRC defines length of curve as 2.7 V square by R and LS is equal to V square by R. So V square by R, 2.7 V square by R for plane and rolling areas, terrain, and whereas V square by I for V square by R for hill and steep slope. So this is for hill and steep. This is for plane and rolling. So what is the definition of plane? 10%, 0 to 10%. Slope is called plane, 10 to 25 called rolling, 25 to 60% slope called hill areas or mountain terrain, and steep more than 60% slope is called steep slope. So in this question, it has been asked for mountain terrain. That means we have to use V square by I R formula. So V is given to us, R is given to us, just we need to find the solution. So it would be equal to 100. Next question is vehicle traveled on dry and level from pavement. The condition of the pavement is given to us, that means it is dry and leveled surface. Velocity is given as 80 kmph and brake applied. The vehicle traveled 80 meter before the stopping. The coefficient of friction that will be developed is. So in this case, we will use the stopping side formula. We know that stopping side distance formula is composed of two parts. SSD is composed of two parts, lag distance plus braking distance. Lag distance is due to the reaction time. Before application of brake by the driver, the reaction time is taken to act onto the condition. So in this reaction time, some distance travels by the vehicle. So this distance is termed as lag distance, whereas after the application of brake, the vehicle traveled distance is called braking distance. So lag distance, the final formula in meter is 0.278 times velocity into reaction time plus v square divided by 254 f. 254 f. So this is the final formula, but in this case it is only asked vehicle stopped 80 meter before stopping. That means we are only dealing with this part. That means we need not to calculate the SSD here. It has been asked that only braking distance is given to us. That means this braking distance is 80 meter is equal to v square by 254 f. F is the frictional coefficient in longitudinal direction, which is equal to 0.35 to 40 as per IRC. 0.35 to 0.40. So just by inserting all the values, we have to find this f value. 80 is equal to, velocity is also given 80, 80 square divided by 254 f. So by solving this, f will be equal to 0.314. So 315 will be the answer. Option B will be the correct answer. Moving forward, question number 65th. Bituminous materials are used in highway construction because their cementing and waterproofing properties. Bituminous material is a fractional distillation of petroleum. So bitumen is obtained from petroleum by fractional distillation. That means it is a residual part in the furnace whenever raw petroleum material is refined in the refinery. Whereas tar is a destructive distillation of the coal. So tar is a byproduct or the final product and the only product obtained from the coal or the plant source, whereas bitumen is the destructive distillation. That means, no, sorry, fractional distillation, because bitumen is not only obtained in the refinery, but petroleum product and other petroleum product like petrol, diesel, kerosene also obtained. So that's why it is called fractional distillation. Now, why it is used in highway? Because of the cementing property. That means it can bind the other materials in the vicinity of the bitumen material, called cementing property, and it is also used for the waterproofing material. That means it will not allow water to penetrate in between. So that's why these two property makes bitumen as a pavement material as a binder. Next question is, flow mass curve is an integral curve. A flow mass curve is nothing but whenever we accumulate all the hydrographs, whenever you accumulate all the hydrographs, hydrograph is nothing but runoff versus time. So whenever I will accumulate all the hydrographs of all the times, then and add it, then it will give you flow mass curve. So flow mass curve is an integral curve. Integral curve means summation of all the hydrographs. So in this case we will get also in chronicle order. In chronicle order. So the answer will be hydrograph. The formula is simple. Volume will be at time is equal to 0, time is equal to t, discharge dt. So discharge is obtained from, that means runoff, discharge is here, runoff is obtained from hydrograph. So it is the integral curve of hydrograph with respect to time. Next question is water present in the artesian aquifer. Artesian aquifer means confined aquifer. So whenever water is confined between two impervious layer, what happens? And water continuously entering into it, what happens? A time will come when the inside pressure, due to the excessive water entries into the voids, air will be expelled out first, and then pore water pressure will increase, and this pore water pressure increment will be even higher than the atmospheric pressure. So what happens between the two impervious layer, whenever a well is penetrated into this layer, the water will automatically comes out, and it will automatically comes out on the surface without any external help against the gravity. That's why the pressure is always above the atmospheric pressure. So above atmospheric pressure will be the right answer. Which of the following spillway is the least suitable for an earthen dam? So earthen dam, Ogi spillway is the type of spillway in which overflow is allowed on the dam itself. So in Ogi spillway, the flow is allowed on the dam itself. So what happens in case of earthen dam? If the flow of water will happen on the soil, because earthen dam is made of the soil basically. So when flow will happen on the soil on the downstream side, this water will erode the soil or erode the surface of the dam. That's why Ogi spillway cannot be provided. Ogi spillway is only provided in concrete dam or rock dam or any other dam. It cannot be provided in earthen dam. Next question is 6-hour unit hydrograph is given, catchment area is given, is triangular, that means a triangular shaped catchment area hydrograph is given. What is the base? It is 65 hours. This is the discharge value. And direct runoff hydrograph of this catchment area we have to find out. Effective rainfall is given as 2 centimeter. We know the effective rainfall. Effective rainfall formula is volume upon catchment area. Volume means volume in the total volume passed by the discharge. So volume upon area. So effective rainfall is given to us. Volume we want to find. Area of the catchment is given to us. So by equating 2 centimeter to the area 117 kilometers, so we need to convert it into meter 10 raised to power 6. So we get the volume from here. So volume is approximately 2.34 into 10 raised to power 6. So we will get the volume, and we can calculate the volume from this diagram. Volume is the half into base into height. So half, base is given as 65, and height discharge we want to find. So volume is already known to us. Now by equating this we can find the discharge. So discharge will came out as 20 meter cube per second. So it's a simple question. So 20, option B will be the correct answer. Next is, this is the Regime channel. Discharge is given 100 meter cube per second, and longitudinal slope S is given to us 0.0002, and silt factor has been asked. So we know the formula of slope for Alesi's theorem, f raised to power 5 by 3 divided by 3340, discharge raised to power 1 by 6. By inserting the value of discharge and slope here, we can get the value of f. So silt factor would become 1.24. Silt factor is 1.76 into under root d. Okay, so 1.24, option C is the correct answer. Next question is, in case of cash flow monitoring, it is recommended to draw cumulative diagram. Cash flow monitoring means in a project we are monitoring how cash is going on as the project progress. So money versus time chart is called cash flow monitoring chart. So it is called cumulative diagram. As the time will progress, the money flow will increase, keep on increasing. It will not decrease. Next is, owner has installed conditioner, air conditioner. The cost is this much. Life is given as 18 years. The coefficient of sinking fund has been asked. So we know the coefficient of sinking fund formula. So it is equal to I upon 1 plus I raised to power n minus 1. I is the interest rate. So by inserting I is equal to 0.5% interest rate. So 0.05, n is at 18. We can get the sinking factor. It is equal to 0.0355. So option B is the correct answer. Next is minimum crushing strength for a brick should be. So as per IS code, minimum strength of any bricks should be 3.5 megapascal Newton per mm square. So in kg per centimeter square, it would be 35 kg per centimeter square. Moving ahead, next question is, a 3-hinge arch has a span of 30 meter, rise 10 meter. The arch carries a UDL load. A UDL load is given, and 6 kN on the left span. That means this is a 3-hinge arch. Third hinge is at crown. The UDL is on the half left portion, and 2 concentrated load is there. This is at 5 meter, 16 kilonewton. This is 10 kilonewton at 10 meter from right hand support. This is at 5 meter, this is at 10 meter. So determine the horizontal thrust. In this case, we have to find the horizontal thrust that will be developed due to these loadings. Now to find the horizontal thrust, first of all we have to find the reactions, and reactions can be found out by taking bending moment about any supports, either A or either B. So by taking bending moment about A, you can find the reactions. That means RB will be, you will find the RB will be 42.5 kilonewton. So 42.5 kilonewton will be RB, and RA will be 73.5 kilonewton. So in this way, you can easily find the reactions. Now to find the horizontal thrust, you have to take moment about this crown point, this point C. So by taking moment at C and equating it to 0, since there is also a hinge available at the point C, so if there is a hinge, bending moment at the hinge point will be 0. So moment at C will be 0. So by taking moment at C on either side, you will get the value of H. So once I will take the moment about C, it will be equal to VV into this distance and H into rise, and this loading into this distance, this loading into this distance. So after equating all the values, you will get the value of H, that means horizontal thrust, and it will be equal to 42.75 kilonewton. So the answer will be C. Next question is parabolic cable. A parabolic cable is given to you. Span is 16 meter, dip is 3 meter. Now you have to find the length of the cable. Now length of the cable can be found out using the equation, again using the parabola equation. In case of parabolic cable, we know the equation of parabola. for a parabolic cable is y is equal to 4h divided by L square into L minus x. So this is the equation to find the dip value at any point, at any given point of x. You have to just put the value of x, you will get the dip. So, and maximum dip you will find at the center for a parabolic profile, which is given as 3 meter. So now by using this we can also find the length. The equation for length is integration of 0 to L ds. ds is the elemental length of a parabolic arc. So this is the ds, elemental length. So after integrating it from 0 to L, you will get the total length of the, so equation of the total length after putting all the values will become L plus 8h square divided by 3L. So now we have to just insert all the values. So L is given as 20, 8, h is given as 3 square divided by 3 into 60. So now you will get the final value as 17.5. So in this way we can calculate the length of the parabolic cable. So 17.5 will be the length of the parabolic cable, whereas 16 meter is the straight length. Okay, moving to the next question. 76. Two wheel loads of 20 kilonewton spaced 2 meter apart moves on a girder of span 20 meter. So in this question there is a girder and 220 kilonewton load is given to you. Both of the load is 20 kilonewton, which is 2 meter apart, and the span of the total girder is 20 meter, and it is said that either load leading the other. That means any of the load can lead, because here it will make no difference since both of the load is same. And it has been asked to find out the maximum bending moment at 8 meter from the left end. So we have to find the location of these loadings when location C will yield maximum bending moment. That what should be the position of the bending moment on these loadings so that we can get the maximum bending moment at point C. For this type of loading, we can solve it by simply, I will tell you the whole procedure. Either it is a 2-point load, 4-point load, or any point load and any spacing or any given intensity of the loading. You can find it by simply, first of all you have to draw the ILD for bending moment. So wherever you have to find the bending moment, this will be the maximum ordinate, and this is called YC. And now wherever load is acting, you have to find the Y value. For example, so YC and YC can be found out by maximum ordinate of bending moment can be found out by simple using formula Z into L minus Z divided by L. So Z is the distance at which you have to find the maximum bending moment. L is the total length of the girder. Z is again the same thing. L is the total length of the girder. So after putting this all the values, you will get the maximum ordinate at the section where you are about to find the maximum bending moment. And Y value at the given loading you have to find out. So you can simply find out these values of Y using the interpolation. So it will not make very tough task. So after that means whenever you will place, and what is the procedure? First of all, you will place the first loading at this point and all the loading behind this, and calculate this Y value, and then calculate the bending moment. Bending moment is equal to nothing but summation of the ordinate multiplied by the load. Corresponding ordinate multiplied by the load. Ordinate is nothing but this is what we have calculated, and load is the load given in the question. So bending moment will be the summation of all the ordinate multiplied by the loads. So in this case, if you will find, you will get answer as 176 kilonewton meter, but I think this is not in any option, so I will leave this question because I have checked it multiple times. By all the ways I am getting to this answer only. That means 76 kilonewton meter will be the maximum bending moment at 8 meter from the left support. There may be some discrepancy in the data, so I am leaving this question. I will make a separate video how to find the bending moment in case of ILD for any section in a short video. Currently I am doing only the question part. Next question is, in moment distribution method, sum of the distribution factor at all the member meeting at a joint. So we know that in moment distribution method, suppose 100 kilonewton we are applying bending moment at this point. Depending upon the support conditions of all the members, this moment will be transferred. So this moment will be transferred based on the end condition of the members connected to this joint. So if it is a hinge support, 3 EI by L will be the stiffness. This is the hinge support, 3 EI by L will be the stiffness. Fixed support, 4 EI by L will be the stiffness. Free support, 0. That means out of this 100, this bending moment will be transferred to all the members depending upon its stiffness. And some of the stiffness, that means the ratio. How you can find out how much? That means stiffness of the member divided by summation of all the stiffness. So at a joint, summation of all the stiffness is the sigma s value, and if you want to find how much bending moment will be transferred to this member, then you can find simply by putting s from here, and sigma s is the summation of all the members stiffness, 3i by L plus 4i by L plus 3i by L plus 0. This will give you, so this will give you the distribution of the bending moment in each and every member, and summation of all the distribution factor will always be 1, because this 100 kilonewton meter moment will always be transferred to the members. It will not remain as a residue at this point. So it will be transferred depending upon the proportion of the stiffness, right? So it is always equal to 1. So option C will be the right answer. BOD test, we know that it is a 5-day test at 20 degrees Celsius. As the time is spent by, BOD decreases. Zeolite process, there are many methods to remove the permanent hardness. Lime soda process, zeolite process. So zeolite process is a process to remove the hardness, water softening process. Anaerobic sludge digestion mainly yields. In anaerobic reaction, what happens? Bacteria are able to digest the organic matter in the absence of oxygen. This is the anaerobic. In aerobic condition, what happens? Bacteria utilizes the oxygen to decompose the organic matter. So in anaerobic condition, generally few gases are released, and these gases are methane, carbon dioxide, ammonium. And why these gases releases? Because of it consumes nitrogen and sulfate present in the organic matter. So bacteria consumes nitrate and sulfate from the organic matter and releases methane, ammonia, carbon dioxide, etc. So option C will be the right answer. Okay, so this was from my end. Please leave a comment if you want to know anything else. Thank you all. Thank you for watching. Please do subscribe, like the channel. Thank you all.